Howdy folks, Justin here. Today we are going to do a deck tech for the Big Dumb Sorcerer deck that I've been playing lately. I made a few changes since I first started playing this. Noticeably, the one of my favorite cards, which I just can't seem to really bring up to the point where I want to be continuously playing it. The Venom Tongue has been removed, and so naturally then so has the Staff of Sparks, which comboed with it. Um, I wouldn't fault you for running this, and actually, one of the replacement cards, Elusive Schemer, is similarly weak to Murkwater Witch, but um, the ability to cycle, kind of offsets the loss that you're going to get from that. And of course, if you manage to draw a zero-cost Elusive Schemer from your deck, then you're banking all sorts of value. First, we'll take a look at the removal options available to the deck. We're running 3 Firebolts. This card is great in your opening hand to do things like remove the 2/2 green Pilfer creature, remove an Ungolem, remove a Crystal Tower Crafter that's played without a little more consideration. Just a super valuable removal spell. Also combos well with your Singleton Firestorm and your Ice Storms to remove larger creatures that you don't have quite the damage for. Also combines with Lightning Bolt for the same reason. Um, Crushing Blow, just another essential removal card. Hits a lot of cards that are super important to be able to kill, including Black Marsh Warden with a Divine Fervor out, which is something you're going to come across. Uh, Fifth Legion Trainer, a Pilfer creature that's hit you once. All those things, great Crushing Blow targets, as well as a House Kinsman. Getting rid of that thing as soon as possible is always good. And don't forget that when you remove that thing, plan your turn as if you're going to get a prophecy potentially. So don't play anything first other than the removal spell, so that you can see if you have the opportunity to do something else. Other removal spells: Lightning Bolt, the classic. Obviously, don't plan on this hitting as a prophecy, but super useful to remove a lot of the larger creatures that you're going to be facing. Ice Storm and Firestorm. Um, Firestorm is kind of interesting. I'm only running one, but I like it because it helps set up removal with your other damage-based removal spells, and as well as potentially just clearing out a lane against like a Pilfer Monk in the early game or a tokens deck. Um, and then finally, it's not exactly a removal spell, but Indorol Archmage into Desperate Conjuring will give you a 10 drop and clear a lane. Probably it's going to do 6 damage to everything in that lane. So that's a 11 Magicka little trick that you should keep in mind. As far as prophecies go, we have Shrieking Harpy. This card's great for saving some damage that would otherwise hit you in the face, just slowing your opponent down and smashing into something. If you're about to Ice Storm and you need to do 2 damage to something, super useful in those sorts of things. I would not play this for tempo unless you're playing against, potentially playing against Control Mage, but generally speaking, this is a card you hold onto your hand until you have a target for it, just so you get a little bit of value. Cunning Ally, I guess, is sort of a removal spell I didn't touch on. The deck is majority blue. You're going to hit about 60% of the time plus, and the ability to run 6 Firebolts is amazing. As a 3/3 for 3, it's going to trade pretty well against other things, and potentially give you a 2 for 1. Um, Other prophecy cards. The Firestorm Prophecy doesn't happen a lot because we're only running one copy of Firestorm, but I mean, it's super useful. And in the early game, a Firestorm Prophecy can just totally swing the game around in your favor. Don't hesitate to damage your own creatures, too. You're going to win just by getting to turn like 9, 10, 11, and 12. So if you have to remove some of your own guys to take out some of your opponent's guys, that's okay, because your deck is bigger and dumber than theirs is. Other Prophecy cards, I believe that's it. Just the Lightning Bolt and the Shrieking Harpy. Um, I considered the 2/4 blue creature, the guard creature, for 3, and I was running one of them for a while. And it's not that it's a bad card. It trades pretty well in the early game. I just wasn't able to fit it into the deck list as I worked it out. And you can see the 3-drop spot is already super loaded. And we're going to get to that. The ramp package is Tree Minders and Hist Groves. Tree Minder is actually pretty good in a deck that runs Ice Storm, Firestorm, and all these damage-based removal spells, because just hitting something for a single damage and slowing it from getting to your face for a turn is invaluable, right? Because You're going to save some life, and you're also going to put things closer to the range of your removal spells. So I think Treeminder fits in this deck pretty nicely. And the addition of Histgrove means that Treeminders late game are not dead draws anymore. You only need to draw a total of 3 ramp sources out of your 6 in order to trigger your Histgroves. And in the kind of matches where Histgrove is great, in the control mirrors for the most part, um, you're going to get to that. You're going to have a pretty good chance of getting to a point where you've drawn 3 ramp sources. And speaking of ramp, we have a huge package of things to ramp into. Nahag Leave, just super powerful card. 7/7 for 7 with guard. It can't be targeted with actions. This can really clog up a lane. Remember to play around charge creatures with lethal. So basically, either the Skooma, the drug dealing cat guy who gives something lethal, that's something you should be on the lookout for, and also the combo of Murkwater Witch and Leaf Lurker in general, and Territorial Viper are the most common ways you're going to see this get removed. So don't bank on it to save your life necessarily, unless you're playing against the colors that don't have those sorts of options. But very solid card. Integral Archmage, only running a single one of these because it's our largest defensive drop, if you will. Relying on an 8 drop to secure the game feels a lot more uncomfortable than relying on a 7 drop to help clear up a lane. Integral Archmage is here because it combos so well with Desperate Conjuring and because it is a 6/6 guard. And as a 6/6 creature, you're going to be able to make favorable trades even if it gets silence or something like this. And if anything in your deck is going to eat a silence, it's likely to be Archmage. 3 Blood Magic Lords, the full package of Blood Magic Lords. Your late game relies pretty heavily on exploiting these guys. It's hard for most decks to remove. We're seeing a decrease in the number of decks running Piercing Javelin and Edict of Azura on the ladder right now, so this is a good time to be a Blood Magic Lord. If it gets silenced, it's still 6/6 to put a card into your hand. Make sure that, in this deck, because you're running 3 and you have quite a bit of other, big ways to win the game, don't be super worried about dropping this on turn 11 so you can defend it right away with the cards he creates. If you have an opportunity to drop it on turn 9, go ahead and do that. If your opponent spends their time trying to remove it, that just sets you up for your card advantage and your Hist Groves and your giant creatures to take over the game. Supreme Atromancer, fantastic. Having one of these on the board when your Hist Grove triggers will give you an extra 4 damage. Um, Keep in mind it is weak to your own Ice Storm as well as opposing Ice Storms, but a lot of the time dropping this on turn 9 when you begin to stabilize is the right move because you get all these bodies to help mop up the board with. Uh, the Dragon Priest, a couple combos to remember here. This gives you an ability to play a turn 10 Odiving if that's what you need to do. It gives you the ability to play a turn 10 Odiving if you have a Desperate Conjuring in hand, although there's a 50-50 that you're going to get Iron Atronach instead. So remember that if you're making that move, to take into consideration which lane you're playing it into, because it's possible that you're not going to get the Odiving. It's possible you get the Iron Atronach instead, which is still a fantastically solid card. Only not running it because I had to put a cap on the number of giant creatures I was running in general, and only running 6 ramp sources. We wanted to make sure that we weren't being a little too greedy, which is of course something I like to do in this game. And there's a Swamp Leviathan. Histgrove too. Keep in mind, this is the ultimate late game, threat in a lot of ways. Knight's Shadow is one of your clawback mechanics. With 5 toughness, it's very difficult for opposing decks to remove, dropped into the shadow lane. And, it's not a terrible idea either to drop it into the field lane if your opponent's not running something like Leaf Lurker, because it's going to end up working as a removal spell unless you're dead on board the next turn, because your opponent's going to trade their creatures into it. And of course, there's Odiving to ramp into, but we all know how fantastic that guy is. The 2 Elusive Schemers, some extra draw, some cycling, as well as a 4 power body to throw into something. And if your opponent is using their removal spells on your Elusive Schemer, I think ultimately you're going to be okay with that. Preserver of the Root, one of the additions to the deck since the initial version. Just really, really effective card. 4 Magicka for likely to be a 6/6 guard, but not the kind of thing you need to play as a 6/6 guard either. If you need something to contest the board, on turn 4 dropping a 4/4 is a pretty solid move. So don't hesitate to just throw this guy down for tempo if your opponent is pushing some damage. And finally, High Rock Summoner. I don't believe I mentioned this guy yet. High Rock Summoner is just a way to get a small body on the board to do some damage to things, similar to how Shrieking Harpy and Tree Miter can be used to set up for better damage-based removal spells, as well as providing some additional late game threats, potentially a 5/5 guard for 5, which is always, welcome in a deck like this. And Desperate Conjuring, um, the obvious one is Desperate Conjuring into Dragon Priest. Desperate Conjuring on a 9 drop, there are only a couple 11 drops in the game. Let's look at the. Well, we're not going to be able to see all the colors with this screen up right now. But the ones you definitely want to try to hit with Desperate Conjuring are your 9 drops and your 10 drop. Although, into Archmage is also not bad. Grabbing a Manticora potentially when you Desperate Conjuring this guy can be super valuable. But even, for value on something like a Shadowfen Priest is not necessarily a bad move. Upgrading your creature that's been damaged because you made some trades with it can really pay off. You're kind of rolling the RNG dice, so it's really in here to use with the creatures that you're more certain that you know what you're going to get. But even on Elusive Schemer or Tree Minder, not a terrible play. There are some times when that's the right move. And don't forget that each of the 3 creatures created by High Rock Summoner have a different Magicka cost, and so you can do different things manipulating those with Desperate Conjuring. Shadowfen Priest, of course, is largely here for the Histgrove Mirror, and also because there's a lot of targets in your opponent's deck you want to silence. Most of the time that your opponent's decks are not going to have more than one support card to remove, so you're not going to need to worry, for instance, about playing against a deck that has Dark Rift and Histgrove necessarily. So just kind of pay attention to what happens with your opponent's plans and use it accordingly. Much more valuable as a support move than a silence in most instances, but sometimes you need to play it for silence. I would hesitate to play this on tempo. An empty board for you is oftentimes a good board, so don't feel like obligated to throw something down just because your opponent doesn't have anything on the board and you think, oh, I'm going to turn this game around. Go ahead and wait it out a little bit. Don't give their removal spells targets, and don't break your opponent's runes unless you feel like you really have the game on lockdown. I believe that is the list. I've been having a lot of success with this. I beat pretty much everything on the ladder, several times. Currently sitting at rank 3, and it's just a lot of fun to play something like this. This is a deck that has a really obvious archetype. This is a color combination has a really obvious archetype in the wards deck. So, the fact we're not playing a single warded creature is pretty fun. I did some experimenting, of course, with both Hiking Emmerich and Shornhelm champions. Just found that they weren't reactive or defensive enough for what I was trying to pull off here. So anyway, I hope you like it. We're going to be playing some games over the next couple days with this and releasing them as we go. And I hope you have as much fun with it as I do. And I will see you in our next video. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.